Hi, my name is Unica. This presentation introduces the physiology of anxiety in the developing brain. The question is why Gen Z is more affected. In this presentation, I will explain how anxiety operates in the brain, not as a weakness or overthinking, but as a real biological process. We will explore how the developing brains of Gen Z make them more sensitive to stress, technology, and social pressure. So, my goal is to help us understand that anxiety has a scientific foundation, and once we grasp the mechanisms behind it, we can offer far better support. Yeah, why the topic is important? We often hear that anxiety is just thinking too much or like overthinking. But scientifically, anxiety is a biological stress response involving multiple parts of the brain: the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, hormones, and the nervous system. And understanding this matters because 1 in 3 young people experience an anxiety disorder, and rates have doubled since 2010 and increased even more post pandemic. Misunderstanding the biology of anxiety fuels stigma, shame, and delays in seeking help. So, when we understand the physiological of anxiety, we are no longer talking only about emotions. We're looking at what is actually happening inside the brain. What anxiety really is. Anxiety is the brain's anticipatory threat detection system. It's designed to help us stay alive by noticing danger early, even when no real danger is present. For example, imagine you're waiting for a text reply, or you suddenly remember an assignment you haven't finished. Your body will react as if something terrible is about to happen, and even though nothing physically threatens you, that reaction begins in the brain. Look, here's what happens. First, your amygdala fires first. It sounds the alarm, even if the danger is just a notification, a social situation, or uncertainty. It's the same alarm system our ancestors used to survive predators. And the prefrontal cortex is supposed to calm the amygdala. But in younger brains or Gen Z brains, this area is still developing. Is for in the youth brains or adolescent brains or youth young adult brains. So this is why a small problem can suddenly feel overwhelming or urgent. The HPA axis releases cortisol. That's why your heart races, your stomach tightens, or your hands feel shaky. The sympathetic nervous system switches the body into fight or flight mode, and it prepares you to run or defend yourself. Even though in modern life the threat is like often emotional or social, not physical. And one more important piece is GABA, the brain's main calming neurotransmitter. And GABA slows down brain activity. When GABA levels are low, those speed up, like your mind is racing, and your muscles may feel tense or restless. That's why many anxiety medications increase GABA to help the brain calm down. So, anxiety is not just in your mind, it's a real biological chain reaction, like multiple alarm systems going off at once. The amygdala overactivation in youth. The amygdala is one of the most important structures in anxiety because it acts as the brain's alarm system. In adolescents and young adults, research shows that this alarm tends to be extra sensitive, almost like it's set to high alert all the time. What does that look like in real life? It means that situation that feels small to adults can feel much bigger to a younger brain. For example, when a student posts something on Instagram and only gets a few likes, the amygdala may read that as a social rejection. And the other example, when someone doesn't reply to a text message quickly, the amygdala may interpret it as danger or abandonment. Or like even something walking into a new classroom can trigger the alarm because the brain is scanning for evaluation, judgment, or unpredictability. So scientifically, studies show that Gen Z has higher amygdala reactivity to stress, social evaluation, and unpredictable situation. This means the alarm goes off more easily and more intensely. And there are risk factors that make the amygdala even more reactive, like a chronic stress. It means the alarm gets overused and becomes jumpy. And about trauma, past experiences teach the brain to expect danger. Also, excessive social comparison, especially on social media, which constantly signal that you're being evaluated. And also deprivation. When the brain is tired, the amygdala becomes 60% more reactive and the prefrontal cortex can't calm it down effectively. So, when Gen Z says like everything feels overwhelming or like small things feel huge, it's not a drama, guys. It's how their brain is wired and what is currently going through. This isn't a character flaw. It's not a lack of faith or resilience. It's not lack of resilience also. It's a biological reality of a developing brain trying to navigate a world full of stressors. Prefrontal cortex, still developing until age 25. The prefrontal cortex, often called the CEO of the brain, is responsible for reasoning, problem solving, calming emotions, and making decisions. But this part of the brain is one of the last regions to fully mature, and it doesn't finish developing until around age 25. So, why does this matter for anxiety? Because when the prefrontal cortex or PFC is still developing, it will be happen like emotional regulation is harder. So the PFC is the brake system of the brain, and in young people that brakes is still soft. So it's like trying to stop a fast car with a bicycle brakes. Thinking becomes overwhelmed during stress. When anxiety hits, the amygdala reacts instantly, but PFC, which is still maturing, needs more time to catch up. So that's why many young people say like this. I know logically I'm okay, but my body doesn't listen. It's become it's because the prefrontal cortex is still developing. And rumination and overthinking increase. The PFC struggles to quiet repetitive thoughts, so worries loop and loop. Example, a 10-second awkward moment at school becomes a 3-hour reply at night, and risk perception become distorted. Without a fully developed PFC, the brain may view small challenges as a major threat. For example, another example, sending an email feels like a massive task, or asking a question in class feels dangerous. One small mistake feels like ruining. This reaction often get mislabeled as dramatic, irrational, or immature, but they are actually the result of a brain that is still wiring itself. So when Gen Z feels overwhelmed, indecisive, or emotionally flooded, it's not because they are weak. It's because their prefrontal cortex is still building the pathways needed for calm judgment and emotional stability. Now we learn about hormones and the HPA axis. So when the brain senses a threat, real or only imagined, the hypothalamus quickly activates what we call the HPA axis. This system releases cortisol, the body's main stress hormone. Cortisol is incredibly useful in short bursts. It sharpens attention, increases energy, and prepares the body for survival. But when cortisol stays high for too long, like it often does in today's youth, it becomes damaging. And chronic cortisol elevation in young people leads to fatigue because the body stays in alert mode even when nothing is happening. And memory problems, especially difficulty recalling information under stress. Also, irritability, where small things feel unusually triggering. Heightened anxiety response, meaning the brain reacts strongly to even mild stress. Difficulty sleeping, as a cortisol interferes with a natural sleep cycle. Why is this happening more in Gen Z? Because Gen Z faces constant low-level stressors that keep the HP axis activated. Like example, phone notification. A single notification can spike cortisol, especially if it's about grades, social media, or group chats. For teens who receive hundreds of alerts daily, their HPA axis barely gets a break. Another example about academic pressure. Even thinking about deadlines or exams can trigger the same cortisol response as a physical threat. The body doesn't know the difference. And example 3, social comparison online. Seeing peers succeed, look perfect, or get attention creates chronic internal stress. The brain stays in constant evaluation mode. Another example about sleep deprivation. Staying up late scrolling increases cortisol, which then disrupts sleeps, which then increases more cortisol. A stress loop. We need to learn about technology, social media, and neurobiology. We know that digital environments strongly shape the developing brain, and technology affects neurobiology in several ways, like as dopamine spikes from notification create reward-seeking loops, and also social comparison increases stress and activates the amygdala. Screen exposure also disrupts sleep cycles, and also constant stimulation prevents the brain from resting. And online pressure increases cortisol. And so Gen Z is not only dealing with real world stress, but also a 24/7 digital environment that keeps their brain activated. For example, a single notification can trigger a dopamine spike, which trains the brain to stay alert, check constantly, and compare constantly. That cycle keeps the stress system activated. So, what the application for youth and young adults? So, understanding the physiology of anxiety helps young people to recognize what their body is doing and choose healthier coping strategies, reduce shame and self blame, seek help earlier, protect their brain through sleep, exercise, and healthy digital boundaries. Knowing the science gives them a sense of control and empowerment. So for families, school, and churches, what they can do,
Churches.
and for parents, teachers, pastors, and mentors have a huge role in shaping how youth respond to anxiety. This is important. They can do like this. Reduce stigma by using scientific, non-judgmental language. Over compassion instead of shame. And also encourage them doing healthy habits. Also can integrate mental health education in community settings, and they can do catch early signs of distress. For example, instead of saying stop being dramatic, adults can say like this: I know your brain is overwhelmed right now. Let's slow down together. That shift makes a huge difference. And about faith integration. Yes, as we know, faith teaches peace for us. but the brain still experiences real biological stress. Some of the verse in the Bible also say, "Peace be open you, and don't be anxiety," and something like that. But we need to realize that God designed the brain with protection systems, but chronic stress can overactivate those systems. So anxiety doesn't mean someone lacks of faith, but it means the brain needs support, healing, and also community. Science and faith together give a fuller picture of how God designed us. For future research directions, I think there is still so much to learn about the anxiety for youth or adolescents and about the brain. So I think research needs to explore about the long-term effects of social media on developing neural pathways, and also about how cortisol shapes brain development over decades, and how faith practice influence the nervous system. Maybe new approaches that combine neuroscience with digital wellness will be a good result too. And this research matters because today's youth are growing up in a world no generation has ever faced before, right? So that's, I think every generation has their own story or their own experience. So I think it's good for doing a research in every generation, in every year, in every way. So for closing this presentation, I want to leave us with anxiety is not a flaw. It is a biological system that becomes overwhelmed in a world that moves faster than the brain was designed to handle. So when we understand how the brain works, how the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, hormones, and technologies shape anxiety, we can respond with more compassion and less judgments, especially for the younger or the adolescents, for Gen Z. So we can create environments where young people feel seen, supported, and understood. Gen Z is not weak. They're carrying stressors no generation has faced before, while their brains are still developing. So this has become our responsibility is to stand with them, not by minimizing their experience, but by offering the knowledge, the tools, and the care that help their brains heal. Thank you. And this is the references.